Welcome to Perpetual Life. Glad to have you here. My name is Neil Vandry, and as your officiator here, I would like to welcome you to our service here at the Church of Perpetual Life. I'd like to start off by letting you know about a special meeting that's coming this summer. In Miami, on July 20th and 21st, you can attend the first ever Global Cryonic Summit organized by our friends at the Cryosphere. When you attend, be prepared to participate in action-oriented presentations, discussions, workshops, and debates while directly connecting with peers and industry veterans in person. Some of the highlighted speakers will include Bill Falloon, Robin Hansen, Ashwin DeWolf, and Micah Mills. You'll hear from the leaders of all the major cryonics organizations, alongside researchers, scientists, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from across the industry and all over the globe. Buy your tickets now during the early bird ticket sale on Eventbrite. You can scan your QR code, go to globalcryonicssummit.com, and you can find a link there. If you need a link or more information, just let me know. If you have any questions about cryonic suspension, please connect with me at any time, and I'm happy to discuss these things with you. Here we are a transhumanist church, and what brings us all together is a common desire to live unlimited lifespans. We are working toward succeeding at living our best unlimited life and defeating death. Here we celebrate all the holidays from all around the world, and I hope that you had a wonderful Sangran festival this month for those of you that celebrate the Sangran. Our services are once a month, and our service next month will be May 23rd with Brian Clement from the Hippocrates Wellness Institute in West Palm Beach. And this event in May will be in person and in Zoom. Be sure to always get our church newsletters. You can sign up at the online sign up, or you can just send me an email through our website at perpetual.life. And with these newsletters, you will hear about all of the events going on at the church and know about many of the new health and longevity breakthroughs going on throughout the world. The Perpetual Life Creed. We believe that all of life is sacred and that we have been given this one life to make unlimited. We believe in our Creator's divine plan for all of humanity to have infinite lifespans in perfect health and eternal joy, rendering death to be optional. By following our prophets, we achieve eternal life, creating a heaven here on earth. We follow Nikolai Fedorov, who taught that the transcendence of the Creator will only be solved when humanity, through our unified efforts, becomes an instrument of universal resuscitation, when the divine word becomes our divine action. And we follow Arthur C. Clarke, who said the only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. And so we enter each day energized in spirit and empowered by the words of our prophets to live in joy, serving our Creator and all of mankind forever and ever. I would like to thank you for your generous donations. You can make a donation online at our website at the top of the page, and your donations will help us to improve our future events and all of the activities at the church. Kyle Zagrodzky is giving us a presentation tonight entitled Fracture Proof. Kyle is the founder and CEO of OsteoStrong. He is a serial entrepreneur and has founded several companies, earning well over $100 million in revenue. He is drawn to concepts that improve the human condition. Speaking on stages all around the world, Kyle is best known for his frequent presence at the Tony Robbins event, where he presents on biohacking and OsteoStrong. Kyle has also been at the RadFest, and he brings together many different experiences across several industries, earning a strong reputation in mid and C-level executive team development, strategic planning, manufacturing, marketing, professional sales, software development, education systems, publishing, and business coaching. OsteoStrong Franchising is the largest global biohacking franchise in the world. It exists to deliver the highest level of physical freedom to people by leveraging new scientific discoveries. OsteoStrong is a skeletal strengthening health center with locations all over the world. With the support of Tony Robbins, Kyle now works to bring knowledge of the best biohacks to the global marketplace. OsteoStrong is no ordinary wellness center. Its approach has helped thousands of clients enhance their strength, balance, endurance, and bone density levels. Let's welcome Kyle Zagrodzky to Perpetual Life with his presentation, Fracture Proof.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate that. I'm so excited to be here. Just a brief thing about me. I've been a serial bootstrap entrepreneur since I was about 18 years old, which is to say I get ideas and then I go self-fund my ideas and bring them to the world. I've started several companies, but OsteoStrong I started in 2012, and it is one of the things I've been most passionate about because of the effect it just has on people's life and giving them and elevating their ability to have the most physical freedom possible. I'm 55 years old. I have a wife and I have 3 sons, and I live here in Brentwood, Tennessee, south of Nashville. I'm going to be sharing information with you today with the goal of helping you to become fracture proof. Excellent. Okay, so some of the things I'll share, you probably already know. The life cycle of bone in typical human being is we add bone and bone density and bone strength up continually until we're about the age of 30 years old. And at the ripe old age of 30, we start to lose bone density. People lose on average almost 1% bone density per year. And then for women, when they go through perimenopause and menopause, they can lose up to a quarter of their bone density during that period. And then it will go back to the regular cadence of about 1% per year. And then there's a picture here on your screen. If you're watching this, you see that what's happening inside of your bone. It is just becoming more fragile, more brittle. That's a trabecular bone inside of your bone, and then fractures can lead to some pretty serious challenges. To give you an idea of what bone loss can actually cause, obviously, well, risk of fractures, we all think about that, but a lot of people don't realize that a hip fracture over the age of 65 comes along with it a mortality rate that is actually higher than that of breast cancer. One of my best friends from college, about 15 years ago, and I wasn't quite 15 years ago, it was about 8 years ago, sorry, his father had broken his hip. And after the dust settled from all that and his father was recovering okay, I went and talked to him about it. And I said, hey, you want to get his house in order because, they usually don't go that well after a couple of years. And, he dismissed me. No, he's doing great. And I was happy to hear that. And I wasn't going to doom and gloom the guy. But about 6 months before the 2-year anniversary, because he atrophied so much. It's not the broken hip that kills you, it's the atrophy and the loss of mobility. He fell and fractured his spine, and almost 2 years to the day of his hip fracture, he died, and it was really sad. There is a strong correlation between osteoporosis and dementia. We also get a muscle loss from as a result of osteoporosis. In fact, a lot of people don't realize it, is that your central nervous system will never allow your muscles to become stronger than what your bones can handle. And it becomes the limiting factor in athletic performance, is bone strength, but also it's a big factor as we age and generally lose our muscle strength. And there's also a strong correlation between osteoporosis and type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes, dementia, osteoporosis, they all go hand in hand. In fact, the Mayo Clinic now refers to dementia as type 3 diabetes. So it's a metabolic dysfunction disease. Poor balance over the age of 65. There was a study that published by Bloomberg about 1.5 years ago. And so they had people standing on one foot for 10 seconds, and then they monitored them for 10 years. And then after 10 years, they looked at the data, and what they found is the people at the beginning of the study who could not confidently stand on one foot for 10 seconds had an 82% higher mortality rate. And so it's all these things working together really come as a result of weakening bones in many cases. The problem that we're seeing is with bone loss is not just the individual problems that I listed, but also the economic costs on society are staggering. This number here that I'm about to share came from a meta study that was published in 2020. These are in 2018 dollars that between Europe, America, and Canada collectively spend between $5 and $6.5 trillion a year treating osteoporotic fractures. That's just a direct cost. That's not preventative. That's not the loss of productivity and all the indirect costs. And that's a massive number. If you look at the annual costs of what we spend on treating cancer and heart disease, they don't collectively come to treating direct osteoporotic fractures. So it's a massive problem, and it's increasing. There have been a couple of studies that have come out that have shown that since 1900, human beings have continually dropped in their peak bone mass, their highest level of achievable bone density at 30, continually over the past 100+ years, and it goes on today. There were studies that came out after COVID that showed that people who got COVID had a dramatic drop in bone density as well. So it's becoming a real problem when you think about all the diseases that surround loss of bone density. It is, I call it the red lever moment. There will become a time where bone density will be the end of the civilization. And so as we sit around and talk about things to increase longevity, and there's some amazing things happening in the longevity, wellness, and biohacking space now that you could really start to see that there's a lot more possibility for a long life. But if we're not doing something that strengthens our bones and keeps them strong as we age, it will be the end of us. So when there's really two buckets of things that really three that lead to strengthening bones. And so there's some foundational things that you need. Nutrients are one of them. And the primary nutrients that build bone, calcium. And I tell people avoid calcium carbonate, avoid calcium citrate. You want to really try to get your calcium from a plant-based plant-based source like algae. Algae is a great source of absorbable calcium, vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. And just a little side note on those two particular nutrients. And so a lot of people take calcium and D3, and D3, I would argue, is one of the most important vitamins you could take. It does so much for your body. I'm not going to go give a whole presentation on vitamin D3, but as it relates to bone density, vitamin D3 will actually help transport calcium into the bone, but it needs another vitamin in order to do that. It needs vitamin K2. And what some people don't realize is vitamin D3 and K2 can compete for absorption in your stomach. And so if you're taking them at the same time, you're getting less of the two. And so I encourage people to take vitamin K2, wait about 30 minutes, and then take vitamin D3. I take 5,000 units of vitamin D3 every day. And then, so I'll take vitamin K2. The reason why you do that is vitamin K2 will bind to calcium in your bloodstream, and then vitamin D3 will carry it into your bone. And so, when we were talking before this presentation started and went live, I'm 55 years old and I have a calcium score of 0, essentially the arteries of an 18-year-old. And it's because I take vitamin D3 and vitamin K2, and it's transporting the calcium out of my arteries and keeping it in my bones where I want it. So that it has a dual effect. Not only help you get strong bones, but help you keep your arteries clean. Collagen protein is important to supplement with, because at the age of 40, our bodies stop making its own collagen. Up until then, our bodies are capable of creating collagen, and collagen is good for your bones, but also your skin and your hair and these kind of things as well. Phosphorus, magnesium, vitamin C. I put collagen protein on there twice, so I must have been really excited about that. And boron. Boron is a trace mineral that that most people don't get, but it also helps a lot with arthritis as well. Some of the things that can increase your rate of bone loss of sugars. And since we're all here in this group of people interested in longevity, hopefully you understand by now, sugars all around are bad. You don't ever want to eat sugar anymore. Just take that out of your diet if you can. Soft drinks will increase the acidity of your blood. Now, there's been a lot of talk about pH balance in blood and this kind of thing, and drinking alkaline water. That I'm not a big proponent of alkaline water necessarily, because your body is always maintaining a level of homeostasis. It has the ability to keep your pH at where it's supposed to be. But the way that it does that is it pulls calcium out of your bones to mitigate and help regulate the alkalinity of your blood. And so if you're not drinking soft drinks or other types of foods that can increase your acidity level, then you're going to be pulling less calcium out of your bones. That's why you want to do that. The other reason why I'm not a huge fan of alkaline water is people drink it all the time, and basically it's making your stomach more alkaline. And so people will sometimes drink it with a meal and then have a hard time digesting a meal. So it's hard to kind of, should I drink it now or should I drink it later? Just avoid acidic foods, and you'll be fine. Hypothyroidism is also responsible for increasing bone loss. Autoimmune diseases can cause that as well. Poor nutrition all around, and then low testosterone and low estrogen are also lead to increases in bone loss. So the foundational things you need nutrition, you need hormone optimization. And I call them foundational because they will have an effect on your bone density, but it's de minimis. Maybe you'll slow it down or stop it, or may even see a slight increase in your bone density when you have nutrition and you have your hormones in place. But there is one important element that you need, and it's stimulation. Now, we've known since the 1890s by a guy by the name of Dr. Julius Wolff. He came up with Wolff's Law. Is still taught in medical schools and chiropractic schools to this day. And the conclusion of the study was essentially that if you put enough pressure on bone, it will remodel itself and become more dense. But what we never knew really was how much pressure is actually needed to build bone. And so there was a researcher by the name of Dr. Kevin Deere out of Bristol, United Kingdom, and he conducted a large study with over 700 subjects completing the study with the goal of trying to find out what is the minimum dose response of pressure to cause your central nervous system to build bone. And so he had a very clever idea. He took accelerometers and he attached them to the hips of the subjects, and then he measured the amount of impact force that they received throughout the day. And he expressed that force in terms of multiples of their body weight, which I thought was pretty clever, because it stands to reason a person who weighs, say, for instance, 250 pounds versus somebody who weighs 130 pounds is going to require a lot more pressure. The bigger person is going to require more pressure on their bones than the smaller person. So multiples of body weight is in terms of measuring how much impact force they were getting. Was actually pretty smart. What he found is what I call the boiling point of water when it comes to triggering osteogenesis, or the growth of new bone. What he found is that people were unable to trigger osteogenesis, none, unless they experienced a minimum of 4.2 multiples of their own body weight. Until they did that, nothing happened. With this extraordinary amount of force, if you just take your own body weight and multiply it times 4.2, you'll start to realize very quickly that, hey, what I've been told is lift weights or exercise is not going to help me build bone like I thought it was going to. And so don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of exercise. There's many health benefits that come from it, but if your objective is building bone, it's just not that effective as we'd hoped for over the years. And so we've had many people come into our centers who have been athletic their whole lives, and then they go to the doctor and they get an osteoporosis or osteopenia diagnosis. And they're like, how's this even possible? I eat great. I've exercised my whole life. I'm an athlete. Now I've got osteoporosis. How did this even happen? Well, the reason why it happened was just it's very hard to create that level of force. Now, to give you an idea of how hard it is Dr. John Jaquish, he's a biomedical engineer, and he developed a program for your iPhone app called Fracture Proof. And the idea behind Fracture Proof is that you would be able to enter your own body weight into your phone, hold it tightly against your hip, and then jump up and down and see how many multiples of your body weight the accelerometer in your phone was able to sense that you were doing. And so I downloaded this program, and I have a concrete floor in my office here. And so I was jumping as hard as I could on the ground. In fact, I was trying not to bend my knees because I wanted to see how hard it would be for me to get 4.2 multiples of your body weight. And on this little image you're seeing here over on the left side of your screen, you can see the numbers that I was getting. And I climbed up on a chair, and then I jumped off of that. And then I have this counter behind me, and I climbed up on that, and I jumped off that. And I was really trying not to bend my knees because in effect, your knees and your hips act as shock absorbers, and your central nervous system doesn't really like impact so much. So you just can't help but to try to take the impact out of it. But there is one, you'll notice on there is one that I was able to enter in manually, and that was back in 2016 or 17, whatever it was. It was just a manual number that I was able to achieve on one of the devices that we created at OsteoStrong to be able to emulate high impact force, but without the impact. And to give you an idea, we have 4 devices. That's what they look like, and it looks a lot like gym equipment. I know that. But it actually functions much differently than in what it does. And so each one of those devices actually helps people to isolate a particular area of their body. But I did want to show this because some people get kind of scared when they like, okay, wait a second, I'm going to be emulating impact force. Like, I don't even know what that means. And so what I decided to do one time is take a picture of one of our members who was sitting on the device and ask her to take your picture and why you do this. And so on the top of there's 2 images there. The top one, she's just sitting there relaxed, and she's just kind of imposing her own body weight. Now, one of the things that the machines do that we have is they've got a robotic arm and real-time biofeedback when you're using the machines. And what we do is a session coach takes you through, and they put you into the most optimal position for you to emulate impact force. And then once you're in that position, the machine locks into place. It doesn't move. The foot plate in the seat in this particular device will not move once you're ready to begin the exercise. And then for about 10 seconds, you'll push as hard as you can. And then you ease out of it and you're done. But while you're doing it, you will see how much force you're imposing on the device. On the lower image here, you'll see that this woman who is in her mid-60s, she is imposing over 1,000 pounds of force through her lower extremities, certainly much more, over 9 point something times her own body weight, sufficient to develop osteogenesis. But I'll draw your attention to one other thing on this image as well, which I thought was very interesting, is you notice on the top image there, as she's relaxing, and she's only putting 100 pounds of force, 113 pounds of force on her body. On the bottom image where she's putting over 1,000 pounds of force, her knees drop substantially. That's because she's able to compress bone and her joints while she does this particular device right here. But she's not in any pain. I was talking to her the whole time she was doing this. She's not breaking a sweat. And she's not going to be sore the next day. Your central nervous system just needs to experience for a brief moment that amount of force, and then it just starts doing all the work for you. So once you have your hormones in place and your proper nutrition in place, you're making your bones thirsty to grow. They are wanting to grow, and when those nutrients are placed, then you get these crazy results, which I'll show you. So there was a study that was done on these devices by Dr. John Jaquish and Basil Hunt in 2012. And the results of that study were then compared to a larger meta-study on things that increase bone density. And I'll show you that here now. So the yellow OsteoStrong study was not part of the meta study, but it was a small study of less than 20 people in that study, but it had a high statistical significance in that study. And so we compared the results to other things that were studied in this in the meta study. And what you're looking at here is there's a horizontal line that says 0%. And what these studies did was they took all these studies included postmenopausal women. They were all 1-year studies. And if they had a loss in bone density, then the number would drop below the 0%. And if they had an increase in bone density, then the percentage of that increase would be represented by the bars there on the graph. And so they had, of course, the control group was losing a couple of percent per year. And then they had another group that added calcium and vitamin D3 supplements, and it slowed the rate of loss, even for people that were doing no activity, but it wasn't able to increase it sufficient above the 0% line. People who added walking saw no change over the people that weren't doing anything. People who added whole body vibration, I hear this a lot. People are like, oh, well, I've got a power plate or a vibe plate or whatever at home. I'm doing something for my bone density. Vibration doesn't seem to have much of an impact on bone density as we'd hoped. And then there was one study where the researcher wanted to find out whether or not really heavy weight bearing exercise could increase bone density. And the good news is he was able to do it. So it was a highly controlled study. And as you could imagine, going and having to lift as much weight as you could possibly lift for 1 year. You had a lot of subjects drop out of that study. It wasn't a fun study, but it did see a 1% increase in bone density over the year. And so it did prove, yes, with a sufficient amount of pressure, they were able to see an increase in bone density. But the lead researcher did point out that it's really not practical for most people to do that. And it's pretty dangerous to go in taking postmenopausal women and having them lift the maximum amount of weight they could lift. And then there's a class of drugs. So there's 2 classes of drugs that people take when they have osteopenia or osteoporosis diagnosis. One class is called a bisphosphonate, and it's the most commonly prescribed drug out there. And there's all different brands out there, Prolia, Fosamax, Boniva, these kind of things. There's all kinds of Actinol. They're all out there. And they just fall into a class of bisphosphonates. And bisphosphonates will increase bone density by 2 to 4% per year. But there's a couple of problems with bisphosphonates. One, you could only take a bisphosphonate, or you should only take a bisphosphonate for about 4 years, and then you're not supposed to take any more any bisphosphonate. So if you have your doctors prescribing you Prolia for 4 years and then switching you to another brand and for another 4 years and switching to another 4, but you're still taking a bisphosphonate. And the problem is the side effects increase the longer you take them, and you can get things like spiral fractures in your femur or osteonecrosis of the jaw, which is basically your mandible bone here in your jaw just starts to decay. It's really hard on your teeth and it's painful. But then there was another very promising drug that came out, because this particular drug increased bone density by 7% in 1 year, essentially adding 7 years of life back to your bone and doing it in 1 year. It's a teriparatide type of class of drug. It's like a bone anabolic steroid, and it's made by Eli Lilly. It's called Forteo. And there's one serious potential side effect from that drug, which is the reason why they'll only prescribe it in extreme cases of osteoporosis where a fracture is imminent, and it's because it's bone cancer, and so you don't want to have to then deal with that. So it doesn't get prescribed very often. And then you have the results of the OsteoStrong study there, where they saw 14% increase in bone density. But what's important to note, beyond the obvious improvements over the other treatments that were analyzed in this peer-reviewed study, in the meta-study, was that the OsteoStrong study was only a 6-month study and not a 1-year study like all the other ones. And it was also done on postmenopausal women as well. Now, there's been some more studies on OsteoStrong, and I like this next one. It's kind of a fun study. It's a very small study, but it was conducted by Aerospace Medicine and Human Performance, which is essentially the research arm of NASA. And so NASA worries about people spending a long time in space, because when an astronaut's in outer space, their bone and muscle density loss is massive. It's this precipitous loss in bone and muscle density. And if you have an astronaut go spend 30 days in outer space and weightlessness, they could lose 10 years of bone mass in 1 month. And you've probably seen some of those old pictures of the astronauts coming out of the capsules, and they can't even stand up. And so they decided, so there's been all this talk about going to Mars and all these things and the space station or whatever. And so they commissioned this pilot study, and it's a pilot study. So it's a small study. So it's not very statistically significant, but a few interesting things came out of the study that I thought were noteworthy. First, the lead researcher, Dr. Ann Sung, who was also the subject of this study. She was not the lead researcher, but she was her own subject. At the time of the study, she was a professional 31-year-old female powerlifter. Now, you wouldn't think that a 31-year-old professional powerlifter would see increases in strength or in bone density, but the results were really quite profound for her as well. And these were the results of her study. It was a 6-month study, and she had a 6.28% increase in her cortical bone, which is the outside layer of your bone, throughout her entire body. She also, at OsteoStrong, our devices always capture the highest amount of force that you could generate on the devices, and she saw a 54% increase in strength. Now, a lot of people have a hard time getting their head around like what that means in real life. But what she did end up seeing was at the gym. So she's a professional power lifter, which essentially means that a power lifter, way they compete is their 1 rep max, how much weight they can lift in a particular exercise would be how they compete. And so it was a very good test of her increases in strength. Now, I had never met Dr. Sung before, but Dr. Jacosh and I were giving a lecture at one of our centers a couple of years ago. And she was there in the audience, and she came up to talk about her study. And so she was sharing these results, but she was absolutely blown away by the physical strength increases she said she had. She said during her talk, she says, I'm a professional power lifter. She says, if I want to see a 3% increase in the amount of weight that I can lift in my competitive lifts, it takes me 3 months of full-on effort at the gym to achieve that level of increase. Like when you get to become a professional, like increasing your swim time by 1 second, right, in a race is incredibly hard to do because you're an elite athlete. After 4 sessions at OsteoStrong, she saw a 12% increase in the amount of weight that she can lift in the gym, which is essentially achieving in 1 month at OsteoStrong 12 months of what it would have taken her to achieve at the gym. The athletic performance increases are so profound, whether a person's a golfer, a swimmer, a long-distance cyclist. They're so profound. I would say that in the future, you'll have 2 types of athletes. You'll have ones that go to OsteoStrong and ones that lose. It's that incredible. Now, we recently funded 2 other studies that just completed in Q4 of last year. They're in peer review now, and so I don't have access to the data from the studies, but I do have a piece of one of them because an abstract from part of the results of one of the studies was published last year, and I'm going to share that with you now. So there's one study that was done in Sweden with 183 subjects, and this one here in Greece was done with 140 subjects. And a funny story about it, Dr. George Korosos, who was the lead researcher on that, he's one of the top 250 cited researchers in the world. And he wanted to do this study because him and his wife go to the center and they were getting all these incredible results. He's like, I've got to do research. So we funded him, this guy, to go do this study. There was 140 subjects in this study. It's a 9-month study. You had 70 in the control group and 70 in the OsteoStrong group. And half the people in each of those groups were taking a bisphosphonate drug for osteoporosis. And the things that were being tested were the density of cortical bone, which is the outside layer of your bone, and the density of the trabecular bone, which is the inside tissue of the bone. It's that spongy tissue inside your bone. And the reason why I make this distinction here, because it's very important. If you take a bisphosphonate drug, the only thing that it can affect is the density of the outside layer of your bone, not the density of the inside layer or trabecular bone. And so this study looked at both those things, but they also testing people on their improvements in balance, physical strength, and A1C or HbA1c, which is your long-term blood glucose marker. Diabetics are always very concerned about their A1C. And so here were the results from the abstract. Now, the abstract just looked at the lower lumbar region of the spine. That's the only piece of the study I've seen. And in this period of time, the OsteoStrong group increased bone density by 2.1% in the spine and trabecular bone density by 1.73%. Alternatively, the control group had basically, I would say that's no gain or loss. I would call that zero because negative 0.12 is almost nothing. And their cortical bone density and a negative 1.3% loss in their trabecular bone. Now, why in the world would they see almost no change in the cortical bone density? Well, because half of the subjects were taking bisphosphonates, which increased bone density by 2 to 4% per year. So they kind of leveled out the playing field. But they had a loss in trabecular bone because your bone grows from the inside out. So the inside density of your bone is a reflection of what your future outside density is going to look like. To put it another way, there was a 179% greater increase in the cortical bone tissue of the OsteoStrong group over the control group, and a 200% improvement in trabecular bone density over the control group. And the average T-score of the OsteoStrong group increased from a negative 2.27 to a negative 1.93. So they'd come out of osteopenia. It's very exciting. And they did it in just that short period of time. Now, I talk about strength gains a lot. And so one of the things that we decided to do, the next screen I'm going to show you is not a published study. This is more of an internal case report that we did. But we just decided to look at the strength increases, the amount of force that people were able to generate on the devices, because we're capturing that number. And we looked at a random sampling of 500 people, and those 500 people had an average age of 52. And over 4 years, they were able to increase the amount of force that they could generate by 290%, which is extraordinary. Just people in their, you don't think people in their 50s are getting a whole lot stronger, if that makes sense. And then this was, I'm sorry, this graph is not as clear as I'd like it to be, but this was the effects of Dr. Jaquish and Basil Hunt's study on A1C. So, and A1C, like metabolic dysfunction is, everybody has a little bit of metabolic dysfunction. And what that is really is in your muscles, you have insulin receptors. And so when you eat something that causes you, your glucose to go up, either sugar or carbohydrates or anything like that, your body will convert that into glucose. Your liver will release insulin. The insulin binds to the glucose. And then once it binds to the glucose, then your insulin receptors and your muscle cells can pull it into your muscles because your muscles want sugar. But what happens is two things happens. One, poor diets overwork your insulin receptors and they become dysfunctional. Also, as you're losing muscle mass with age, as your bone density goes down, you have fewer insulin receptors. That's why older people will be more concerned about insulin and glucose because they're just losing muscle mass. And so this study showed that just by doing once a week OsteoStrong sessions for 3 months, the subject of that study was able to reduce A1C greater than people who just did cardiovascular exercise, who just took metformin, which is actually one of the pharmaceuticals that I really do like and think is good for you. It's a very effective drug. Weight-bearing exercise or cardio or restricted calorie diet. So it outperformed all of them. The great thing about treating type 2 diabetes is you could actually do all these things and get a stacking effect. And so that really does, I think, the research that's out there, the ones that we're going to be publishing soon, will have just a massive effect, because when you look at type 2 diabetes, dementia, osteoporosis, these kind of things, OsteoStrong has this incredible effect. But there are some other things that OsteoStrong does very well. One is reduce joint and back pain for almost everybody. I'll just tell you my own personal testimonial. I'm 55 years old, but when I was about 19 or 20 years old, well, I was an athlete, but I had several injuries from being an athlete, but I had a really bad one where I hit my head so hard, I almost broke my neck, and I had a permanent knot on the right side of my neck and would get migraine headaches about every other week. since that time. And my joint and back pain just increased over time from the other injuries. By the time I was in my mid-30s, my knees were already cracking. My right hip was hurting me. My back, I had back pain in my lower, my middle, my upper back. I had a problem with my right elbow and my right shoulder, such that I couldn't even go throw a ball with my oldest son when he was in the 5th grade. I had to do this underhand toss thing, and he used to make fun of me for that. I started OsteoStrong in my very first session. I'll be honest with you, I was a little scared when I was testing out Dr. Jake Wish's prototype device. And I thought, man, what if this hurts me? After about 6 sessions or so, right around there, all my joint and back pain was gone. I went from taking 10 to 20 Advil a week to deal with my pain to having no pain at all. My knees didn't hurt anymore. Now at 55 years old, I go up and down the stairs. My knees don't crack. And my story is one that tens of thousands of other people can tell about OsteoStrong. We've had people, cancel scheduled hip and knee replacement surgery just because they don't need them anymore. My father's one of them, and he's now in his mid-80s. The other thing it does, it has a tremendous effect on balance. So one of the things that we do when we see people come into OsteoStrong, we'll have them stand on one foot, and then we'll time them, see how long they could confidently stand on one foot. And many times we have people come in and they're standing on one foot and they're unsteady, maybe 3 or 4 seconds. And then after 5 or 6 sessions, they're standing on one foot for 15, 20 seconds. The balance improvements are dramatic. And so you guys, if this is something that interests you and there is an OsteoStrong near you, you're more than welcome to go out and try a free session. So you can go to our website and just click on free session. Again, I just want you to try it for free. This is just information. And if this isn't right for you, no judgment whatsoever. So I have one of my franchise owners here on the call, Dawn Hawley from Fort Lauderdale area. She's amazing. And a wealth of biohacking knowledge as well. So she's awesome.
Yes, well, thank you, Kyle. That was a great presentation. I have a question for you from our YouTube, our live stream. And let me start with this one. Do we have any data yet on how GLP-1 agonists and SGLT2 inhibitors impact bone health, since weight loss reduces bone density and SGLT2 inhibitors?
I don't have that data here in front of me right now. Dawn may know that. I don't know if you have it now. She doesn't know. I don't really know how they're going to affect bone density. People are always asking me about specific things like that. So many things affect bone density. Like one of the things you have to be really careful of is like steroids and things like that you might be taking for inflammation. A lot of medications that you could be taking can increase bone loss. There's always some new side effect thing, like what's the crazy new weight loss drug that people are all excited about. Like I really worry about stuff like that, especially new drugs, because there's always some oopsie side effect we hear about years later. So I'm not sure about the effects of what you asked me on there.
And you have one of your, is it Dawn that's here? Let's recognize Dawn. Thanks for coming tonight, Dawn. There she is. All right, so let's see if there's any questions.
I'll say I go to Dawn's studio. She's fabulous. Yeah, but she doesn't promote herself enough. She's too shy. She's gone to the church once, and I try to get Neil to have her be a presenter, when we have a live in-person thing. And she's too shy to ask him to let her do that.
We have a question here from the chat box. Let's see if they take a look at this from Brooke. Is this approach getting attention from mainstream medicine, or other groups planning to do related clinical studies? Are you aware, Kyle?
Yeah. So we have hundreds of referring physicians around the country now. We had a hard time getting that when we first started OsteoStrong in 2012. And I would go do presentations like this to physicians. They kind of nod their head and say, yeah, that makes sense. And then they wouldn't refer us to anybody. What really started to change on that was when members were coming in and getting their DEXA scans that they'll usually get every couple of years, and they were having these incredible increases in bone density. And doctors never seen that before. It's just never had seen in people just increasing bone density without medication. And then they're getting results far greater than the medication. So the doctor said, what are you doing? People tell them. I remember one of the very first DEXA scans that we saw that this happened on was a woman had gone in and she went for her DEXA scan, got it done, and the doctor just couldn't believe the result because it was like some 9% increase in bone density or something like that. And so he scanned her again. And the doctor stood there, mouth agape. The doctor was the husband of the woman he was scanning. He was there watching her do these sessions every week. So yeah, these two larger studies are coming out. United Healthcare, if you have their Optum, will pay for the kind of our base membership in a lot of cases. So if you have Optum, that's a really good program to help you with that. And so with the two larger studies. We'll make when those publish, we'll make a harder run at Medicare and other health insurance providers as well.
Let me chime in. I'm on United Healthcare Medicare Advantage, and it's 100 in your service is 100% covered. So they think it's making me healthier and saving them money on claims.
We have a question here in the chat box, and it's asking about the machine and how the machine operates. Can you speak on that?
Sure. So we have these four devices right here. And what you need to understand is, like, say for something, a bench press, for those of you watching me right here. So I move my arms like this. And if I have the bench press bar on my chest right before I push up, this is what we call your weakest range of motion. You have the least amount of leverage right here. And so you can't produce much force. But as you push the weight off of your chest, you will actually increase leverage. There was a study done out of Brazil that showed that when you get just before about 15% out, just before you're locking out your arms, you're doing 7 times more force than you are when the bar is on your chest. So you can do 7 times more weight. So if, let's say, for instance, you do a bench press and you're doing 200 pound, whatever you could do, you're 7 times stronger at your strongest range of motion. That's what we call that. And so at that level, if your joints aren't in motion and your muscles aren't in motion, we lock it into a static position. Then what you'll do when you're in your strongest range of motion and not moving, then you either push or, depending on the device, pull as hard as you possibly can for about 10 seconds. So you're not going to get your heart rate up or anything like that. But when you're doing that, you will see very quickly, like on this screen right here, where this woman, Lisa was her name, I believe, she was able to, because she's not in motion, because and the machine's not putting any force on you. You are actually putting that to force yourself. It has to be that way because we, and not even you, know what your body is even capable of. And so it's very controlled. And then when you're done, you just relax out of it and no weight is coming down on you. So it's very safe. We've done over 11 million sessions now at OsteoStrong, and I think we've had maybe 24 injuries, which is phenomenal. Like if I took 11 million people and I walked them across a parking lot, we'd have more than 24 injuries. So it's incredibly safe, and you have somebody there like Dawn, who's with you the whole time you're doing your session.
That's great. We have a question here. Someone has a friend with bone on bone. Does your process work for that person?
A little bit. Let me explain how that works. And so people ask me, like, how in the world did it get rid of your joint and back pain? Like, that doesn't even make sense. And considering that, like, I'll tell you what, when I had the 2 decades of joint and back pain, if it wasn't for chiropractors and massage, I don't know how I would have functioned in my life. I was going to chiropractor once or twice a week just to relieve the pain. Because what happens, so imagine my 2 fists coming together are one of your joints. And so where most joint pain comes from is that you will have an impinged nerve between the joint, okay? And so when you have bone on bone or thin cartilage, you're getting more joint impingement there. And so when you have bone on bone, you're really dealing with that right now. And so, but when you go to OsteoStrong, you're pushing as hard as you can these 2 bones together, and you think to yourself, how in the world is forcing my bones together going to relieve my pain. That doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. And it didn't to me. So if that's your what you're thinking here, like I thought the same thing. There's just no way this is going to help me. Well, a couple of things happen when you impose force. The first thing that happens, and keep in mind, because your your joint isn't moving while you're doing this, and so it's like you're lifting weights and you're doing anything like this. It's staying static, and then you just start slowly pushing as hard as you can over about 10 seconds that you get to your peak performance while maintaining comfort, and then you ease out of it and you're done. When you do that, first thing that happens is the joint capsule will fill with fluid, causing a natural decompression of the joint. And that may last for 1 to 3 days where like, hey, my back is not hurting me. This is awesome. And then the pain will start coming back, whatever chronic pain you might have been experiencing in that joint. The second thing that starts to happen is as you're strengthening the muscles and supporting ligaments and tendons around that joint, the joint will start to rest apart because you have the supporting structure to support the joint. And so it has the opportunity to possibly relieve bone on bone. Bone on bone is always going to be harder because you don't have any cartilage to rely on. But just by strengthening the tissue around the joint capsule, you could possibly get that benefit. And so, yeah, I mean we see this happening with people all the time. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you, Kyle. Another question coming from a member: how does a bone density test work? Are they consistently accurate?
No,
to these?
they're not. They're very hard to get accurate. So the most common type of bone density scan that you will see in doctors' offices around the country and around the world are called a DEXA scan. A DEXA scan, dual X-ray absorptiometry, and what it does is it sends a low level and a high level wave of radiation, an X-ray essentially, except it's used very low. Like I wouldn't be afraid of it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm getting X-ray. I'm getting X-rays, more radiation in my body. Like you get a full body DEXA scan, it's as much radiation as the equivalent of eating 2 bananas, right? There's radiation bananas. So if you ate 2 bananas, you're getting as much radiation as if you wouldn't got a DEXA scan. So it's a very safe level of radiation. But what it does is because your bone density is it's thick, that's why you can see a bone, it's dense, you can see it on an X-ray. And so basically it's measuring the amount of X-ray that's able to go through the bone. And so it does a little math and it says, okay, I could see how dense your bones are. And if you look at a lot of X-rays, you could actually look at X-rays of people after a while and start to identify that they have low bone density without even doing a DEXA scan. But and so it's going to scan just the outside layer of your bone, and you'll get a score. And so you'll get a 1 of 2 scores, a T score, a Z score. And they're generally they're okay. They're like the gold standard, the best we have, but they're not super helpful. And the reason why is that different machines can give you a different result. And so if you're getting a DEXA scan, you want to minimally go on the same machine every time you go. The other thing is there's a thing called a bounding box when you get on a DEXA scan machine, and it's essentially the area that you have to lay down on the machine, and you need to be in the exact same area. So it helps even having the exact same technician who's giving you your scan, because a different technician, if they have you just a half an inch off, it could affect your score on that machine. And you'll get 1 of 2 scores. You'll get a T score and a Z score. A Z score is how does your bone density compare to other people in your demographic? And by that, I mean your race, your gender, and your age. So it's like, how am I comparing to other people? And I'll tell you why that's important in just a second. And then you'll get a T score, which is how does my bone density compare to someone who's my race, gender, and at the age of 30, because that's peak bone mass. So what you want to do is like, how do I compare to at someone who's peak bone mass who's similar to me, and how much have I changed? You'll get a score, let's say, of like a -1, a -2, or a -3, and a T is in tiger. It's a T score. A T score will show you how many standard deviations you are away from peak bone mass. So a T-score of 0 would mean, hey, yay, you've got the bone mass of a healthy 30-year-old, just like you, male or in race, because that actually matters. Black people will have denser bones than white people. Asians and Hispanics have, and Caucasians, we suffer from more bone loss. And people in the Middle East, women in the Middle East have a real problem with bone loss because they're covered all the time. They're not even getting sufficient vitamin D3, but I digress. So if you had a -2 T-score, which would be considered osteopenia, then you would be 2 standard deviations below that of a healthy 30-year-old. And so I think last bone density I had was a +1 T-score, which is maybe higher now because it was a couple of years ago, which means my bone density is probably on par with a 25-year-old professional rugby player, and I'm 55 years old. I mean, I'm athletic, but I'm not an athlete. And then if your Z-score, the reason why that's important, because people are like, well, what do I care if, like, how I compare to, Betty Sue, who's also 65 years old, right? The reason why you care about your Z-score, because if your Z-score is like, if you have a negative Z-score, meaning like, okay, I've got a -2 Z-score, that means you're 2 standard deviations below somebody who's your age and your gender on average. That means there's something going wrong with you. Like, you've got some other problem. You might have an autoimmune disease, hypothyroidism. You might even be fighting cancer. You could have some other issue, your diet or some medications could be causing precipitous bone loss, or you fought cancer at one point and you were on chemo and radiation. Those things can cause a massive drop in bone density. So yeah, there's different types of bone density scanners, and they're improving. And so there are bone density scanners now that will scan both cortical bone, the outside layer, and trabecular bone, the inside layer, and give you what's called a fragility score. I think once that actually takes effect, you're going to see people taking a lot less bisphosphonates, because a bisphosphonate, that class of drug that's most commonly prescribed, doesn't help your fragility score. And your fragility score is a way of looking at both cortical and trabecular bone density together. So we've had people who've had a low DEXA scan, but a high fragility score. So they had very quality bone. They just could have had really thin bone structure, and it gave a poor result, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, it was a long answer to a good question.
Good answer. A question now, maybe a shorter, but it's got to do with NASA and our astronauts. You talked about how when people go into space, they lose so much bone density just by being in space. Are you familiar with any of the astronauts or other NASA personnel going to using the osteo treatments?
Other than Ann Sung, she's not an astronaut. So no, I'm not aware of anyone's particularly, like, they don't share that information with an entrepreneur like me, because out of fear, like, they don't even let me publish that study on our website. We can have a link to the abstract, but they don't even let me publish the study. And so like, NASA is very hush hush on that kind of thing. And so there may be 20 astronauts using OsteoStrong. They would never tell me.
Yeah, it was very much related. I was interested in space application because you could see the way you described your machines and how they don't rely on body weight, and you're even applying force horizontally. It seems like it would be really ideal for space applications. And do you confirm that that's an ideal application for it?
Absolutely. It's absolutely ideal. So when you're in weightlessness, so your body just doesn't see the need for bone. And so you'll just start eating, your body will start eating the bone because you're not using it. And so while exercise doesn't stimulate bone density to the extent that it builds it faster than we're losing it, it is telling your body that you're using your bones, so you're probably losing it more slowly than you would otherwise. And so if you're in weightlessness, essentially you're emulating high impact force. I mean, when I do the devices, now make the amount of force that I could put on the devices is really high, because I've been doing this for a long time. And so that amount of force is far greater than what a gymnast will even experience, because I'm doing like 20 plus times my body weight on certain devices. And And so that not even a gymnast is getting that level of force on their body when they go and do osteo, or when they go do their jumping through the air and they spin and hit the ground. And gymnasts have superhuman bone. They've got probably the strongest bone structure of any class of athletes. So it's all about force on the bone. And that's been proven to have a very positive effect on increasing bone density.
Well, we have John next. John, go ahead.
Hi, Kyle. That was a very interesting presentation and very interesting results. I'm curious, in my younger years, I used to hear about isometric exercise, which is when you're pressing on something that doesn't move. Is this a form of isometric exercise? Or if not, how is it different?
Not in the way that you've ever done it. And so the isometric exercise is very safe on the joints. And that's one of the reasons why people like to do isometric exercises. But you're generally doing 1 times your body weight. When you, so if you do wall sits, so you just basically go and you bend your knees at like a 90-degree angle and you just kind of stand up there against the wall. You will fatigue your muscles, but you're doing 1 G of force. You're not adding any extra force to your body. Even if you're holding plank position, you'll fatigue the muscle. You just won't. You're not getting 4.2 multiples of your body weight. I did see somebody ask the best type of calcium. Plant-based calcium is the best type of calcium. You should never take calcium carbonate. It carries a charge to it that basically sticks into your bone. It calcifies your pineal gland. It could calcify, accumulate your joints, your veins, and all that kind of stuff. So an algae-based calcium is really good. There's Algae Cal makes a really good product. You can just get that off the shelf, and Dawn's probably carries it in her center. So a lot of our franchisees, I got a friend of mine, she makes a product called Energy Bits, and it's a calcium product. You can get those online, but I mean, Algae Cal is a great product, and I recommend that one.
One thing, when I was in my 50s, I started to get sore joints, and I took resveratrol, and that fixed it. But then I heard about side effects from resveratrol, and I took up OsteoBiflex, which really works. I've never had sore joints since I took OsteoBiflex, and I take it twice a day. Dr. Stephen Gundry recommended it for also heals your gut, and it has all the things for building collagen in it, right?
Yeah, the glucosamine, chondroitin, and then different vitamins that will actually help to build collagen, add collagen and things like that. So it'll help for sure. Yeah, I could get FDA approval. FDA approval is not the problem. One of the reasons why I never really cared about getting FDA approval. A, it costs money. B, it doesn't really help you grow your business. I could advertise results of a study, which is what we do. And so we could advertise that without, we'd say, but we could never say it cures anything. We see people reversing their own osteoporosis. We just can't claim it has anything to do with us. And even if it did, we still couldn't claim it. All we could say is research shows that people increase bone density. Here, talk to these 40 members walking in the door, they'll tell you the same thing.
This question in again to readdress this. What plant-based brands of calcium do you recommend, Kyle? And where can you get them? And do the citrate and carbonate versions are they less effective or harmful, and why?
I don't like the ones I recommend, Algae Cal or Energy Bits, and that's not even the full breadth of. You can find just all kinds of algae products. Most of our franchisees will carry Algae Cal, and so you could stop by one of those or order those online. So those are pretty easy. Energy Bits or Algae Cal are really good ones. The calcium carbonate that is like the least absorbable form. I mean, it's like limestone. You just might have crushed up limestone. It's calcium carbonate, and so it carries a charge to it it makes it not absorbable. In fact, it makes it want to stick to your arteries. So you don't want calcium carbonate. Calcium citrate is better. It's just not nearly as absorbable as a plant-based calcium.
Brooke, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I think you mentioned there was the 2 clinical studies that were ongoing, and do you have any estimate when the results are going to be published?
Oh, the studies are done. They're in peer review, and you're waiting on peers to review, so they don't get paid to do that. So it could take anywhere from 6 months to 18 to 24 months to go through peer review. So I'm writing a second edition to my book to highlight these studies, because it'll show that there's nothing better in the world. And virtually everything that we do, from bone density, muscle strength, balance, and A1C, the studies will prove that it's the most effective solution on the planet, I
There's
believe.
so many different directions to go to improve your health, that to get interventional clinical studies is really a big boost.
Yeah, they cost a lot of money. I didn't want it. It's like, it's one of those things, I was not happy when I had to write the sizable checks to do that. And the reason why is because it just takes years to get them done. And then on top of that, you're just like, okay, this is really a deferred gratification check.
Yeah, really.
Right. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. But, and the bad news is we started those studies in 2019 or beginning of 20, and then COVID hit and it totally derailed the studies. And then after COVID, they had to be restarted, and it slowed everything down. So it was just like, okay, I just have to pretend I never had that money.
Kyle, I gotta say, man, this hit it out of the park for me. This was exactly the kind of presentation I hope we have at Church Perpetual Life. It was legitimate, it was informational, it was non-hypey, it was evidence-based, it was empirical. Basically all the kind of descriptors and adjectives that we want to bring to the table. I'm just thrilled with your presentation. I love this program. I already brought my wife in here because she's had some issues, and unfortunately we live in Daytona. It turns out that our nearest franchise is about an hour away, but hopefully you'll be selling a whole bunch more of them. And
well, if you know Dr. Joseph Mercola, he has a set of our equipment in his house. Maybe he'll let you use it. He lives in Daytona.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Let me write that name down.
Yeah,
Mercola.
Well, no, he's
I just wanted to tell you how pleased I am with with this information. It's intriguing to me that something as short as a 10-second push can let your body know that it needs to rebuild some things.
Yeah. And the weird thing about it is you don't have to fatigue your bone. That was one of the biggest challenges we had when we started, because people were like, well, I want to come in more often. I want to come in more often. But bone, you only come in one day a week. And the reason for that is bone is very dense material, and it takes it a week for the bone remodeling process and the recovery to take place. It's like you don't work out the same muscle group, or at least you shouldn't, every day, because recovery in bone protein synthesis takes about 36 to 38 hours. Bone remodeling takes about a week, and that's why you only come in one day a week. And so your only objective when you come to OsteoStrong is you just want your central nervous system to, only for a couple of few seconds, to experience that level of force. And if you think about it, a gymnast, and even when they're doing their thing and they get impact, that's 1/100th of a second. They're getting many multiples of their body. Even if they do that 30 times in an afternoon, and if you go into OsteoStrong and you hold that level of force for 3 seconds, you're getting like 100 times more duration on your bones in terms of force than even a gymnast would be getting during a regular exercise. So you're getting all the stimulant you need. You're not causing yourself pain. You're not getting fatigued. You're not getting all sweaty, and you just go and live your day. You're like, that's it. That's all I have to do. But you're going to feel great for whatever reason. It just kicks up your endorphins and your dopamine, and you're all happy after you leave.
Oh, that sounds superb. I do have to have one question. I guess this is in essence, proprietary technology that you've got some kind of patent on. And this may or may not be comfortable to answer. I don't know. But, have you actually patented the idea of a stationary feedback related thing? I mean, is that a patentable idea?
We have created some new patents around our devices. We've also created new technology in some different modalities and data gathering systems that we've created.
I'm willing to stipulate you're a way bright guy. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. You know what? I try to surround myself by people smarter than me. And I do not have a problem telling people I don't know and how do I do something. So I'm a good listener. I'm like if you ever heard that story about Henry Ford, when all the media thought that he was a big dummy and didn't know how to do anything, and they were challenging him, you don't know how to run your business. So he's like, he had like 5 or 10 telephones on his desk, and people would come in and ask a question about manufacturing or accounting or whatever, and he'd pick up a phone and he'd call his accountant and he'd ask the question, and he'd give him the answer. He'd call his fleet foreman and ask him a question. Like, you have to know how to do everything. One of my gifts is I love people, and I always ask myself, how can I make it better? And because I want to elevate the purpose of my life is to elevate people to their highest level of physical, emotional, spiritual level of freedom, and do it while having the best time possible. And so I'm always keen to try to figure out how to do that. OsteoStrong is a vehicle by which I could live out the purpose of my life. And because of that, I'm always looking for ways to, like, what does a person need to hear to know what this is going to do for them? What do they need to experience so that they will continue to do it? How do I build a company culture that will create the level of raving fan customer service that will make people happy when they're there? And that's I live within that state. I don't have to know everything, and I don't ever pretend like I do. But I try to do the best I can. And if I don't have the answer and somebody needs it, I know the people to call to get it.
That is outstanding.
Thank you for that. And we'll put any of the important questions, we'll connect you with that at a later time. Thank you, Kyle, for this great presentation.
I am so grateful for the invite. I really just hope that what I was able to share was in some services to all of you who attended. So thank you all much. I appreciate your heart for wanting to be the CEO of your own health and learning these kind of things. It's a beautiful place to be, and that's something we definitely want to spread around the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Bravo.
Please share this event with someone that you care about. And remember to join us in Zoom next month, May 23rd, when we will have in person and in Zoom Brian Clement of the Hippocrates Wellness Institute coming down to the church in Pompano Beach, and we'll be having him giving a presentation. Again, that'll be in person and hybrid in Zoom as well. Thanks for joining us tonight, and I wish you perfect health and unlimited lifespan. Good night now.